going to start this topic of hip dysplasia with etiology. What leads to hip dysplasia? So honestly, the easiest way to remember this is my super clever story. You guys are going to just laugh when you hear it, but it's so easy. Shakira shakes her lax hips with her siblings at the breach. Okay, not beach, the breach. So Shakira is a female, boom, that's like one of the etiologies right there. She's got ligament laxity, that's like the second or on the list. And we've got other siblings involved, number 3. And then we've got firstborn at the breach, 4 and 5. That's like 5 different etiologies in 5 seconds. We're done, boom. We're like moving on to signs now. Okay, the biggest thing with the signs is remembering there's femoral shortening, abduction of the hip is very limited. You've got asymmetrical gluteal folds, which just means there's more folds on the side that is going to be dislocated. Okay, more folds on the side that's dislocated. So then we've got the Trendelenburg or waddling gait. Essentially what this is you've got gluteus medius muscle weakness. This is a major muscle. Its function is to abduct the hip. Best way to remember this, to see which side is affected, is to remember the hip dips on the good side. So whenever they show you a picture of a kid standing, which is usually the case, just remember the side he is dipping to is the unaffected side. Then the last one on the signs list is the Gallier sign, also called Alice sign. And this one's positive if the knee height doesn't line up. Okay, you still have the hips and the knees are going to be flexed, and the dislocated hip is going to have a lower knee height. But keep in mind, there can be false positives. In most bilateral cases, that's usually the case, is false positives. Here's the picture showing the same thing, the lower knee height, and then here's me adding some little swag to this stuff, highlighting it, and then that is your acronym for the signs. Fat Galliers. For some reason, for the longest time, I thought it was pronounced gazelle. I don't know. So I am going to randomly pop a picture of a gazelle right here, just, to add to your picture memory. So Fat Galliers. And then there's a picture for the side, which is the right side that has more gluteal folds, is going to be the dislocated side. So now moving on to the different tests for hip dysplasia. And I'm going to put a star on this because it is on boards, high yield. Okay, the first test is going to be the Barlow's test. When you hear Barlow's test, remember, go out to the bar. So essentially, you're using this test to see if the femoral head is outside of the acetabulum. And this, all it does is it involves by adducting the hip and pushing it down. So if it was an unstable hip, it's going to be a positive result and you'll be able to sublux the hip out of place. The biggest thing to remember with this is adducting the hip. So I just remember Barlow starts with a B. You can't have 2 B's together. So it's going to be an adducting, not abducting for it. And then I'll go ahead and put a picture here too, just for all the visual learners, myself too, throw it out there, okay? There is another test. There's a second test that you can do, which is called the Ortolani's test. With the Ortolani's test, whenever you hear Ortolani, you want to remember O for out, so see if it goes in. Essentially for this one, you are relocating the subluxed or partially dislocated hip back into place. Well, you could be doing this to a normal hip and hear all sorts of noises, right? Clicking noises are okay in a normal hip. But for an unstable hip, you will be hearing a clunk. And to hear that clunk, you'll be hearing that when you abduct and push down on that hip. So remember, the key thing with this one is abduction. Barlow is adduction. These little subtle points are great testing topics. So now that you know the different tests, you know the etiology, you know the different signs, how do we manage these patients? So the key for management is initially you should be doing an ultrasound, okay, just to rule out any other pathologies besides an unstable hip, okay? If they're negative for anything else, they only have the unstable hip, just observe them for about 6 weeks and see if they grow out of it. Okay, next you'll do a repeat ultrasound after the 6 weeks is over. And if the baby still has an unstable hip and they are less than 6 months of age, you're going to put them in a pelvic harness. The key thing with this pelvic harness is you do not want to put that on for more than 6 months. You're probably wondering why. Well, it can cause avascular necrosis of that femoral head. So now for people who are babies who are between the age of 6 and 12 months, you can do close reduction and a spica bandage. For 18 months and older, you definitely can do an open reduction and internal fixation. So go ahead and put hardware in there. And that is a picture of this. One on the top is the spica bandage, and then you've got the pelvic harness that you can put on. Moving on to our next topic, where I'm going to explain different radiographic lines that are specific for hip dysplasia. So on this picture, I'm going to make this very easy, super straightforward, so don't get overwhelmed with all these different lines. The first line we're going to talk about is the blue line, also forms the vertical line for the quadrant, and is called the Abra-Deni's line. This line is named after this cool guy with a stash. He actually was a pediatric plastic surgeon born in Paris. Next, we've got the yellow line, and this one represents the acetabular index. Essentially, it creates an angle using the red line, and at birth, it's usually around 20 to 30 degrees. But by the age of 2, it should be down to 20 degrees. If it's greater than that, greater than 30, it's a sign of a dislocated hip. Now we have got the red line also, and this is called the Hilgenrainer's line. That is my American German way to pronounce it, named after this German surgeon. And then we've got the green line, which is called the Shenton line. This is essentially the medial side of the femoral neck, and it's supposed to be in line with the obturator foramen line. As you can see, the left side is offset, and that is your dislocated side. You guys, gotta add my color here. I can't go anywhere without color. So we've got blue for blue, yellow for yellow, red for red, and then got my green down. So now that we've colored coded everything, highlighted everything, we've gone through the etiology, the signs, the Barlow test. I'm also going to put a link to a YouTube video on there to see, you can see how a physician performs the Barlow and the Ortolani's test, just so it's ingrained since it's one of the higher yield topics. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you have any suggestions on other podiatry related topics I should go over next, leave a comment below or visit the website. Dr. CB signing off. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.